done and kind of ruined the first poem, but I'm going to do it anyway. I work in the arts now. I work in the arts now. I meet creative people, nice people, sensitive people. Sometimes they ask me what I did before. That's when I tell them I was in the army. They usually look puzzled then, shocked even, and seek reassurance. How long for, they ask, hoping it was a brief and hateful experience. 25 years, I say. Now they're starting to get worried. They hardly dare ask what I did, but they do. That's when I tell them I was an accountant. Now they do look puzzled, as if they can't decide which is the most appalling piece of I'm right in residence for the Soldiers Charity, the Army Benevolent Fund, and it's Remembrance Sunday yesterday. It was also my birthday, coincidentally, every year. And so I'm of a generation that's fathers and, well, parents lived through the war, really, but all our games revolved around war games, and were outdoors because no one had devices in those days. Go out, come back at tea time. And I just thought it must have been strange for them to see us make a game of what they lived through. And there was a comic called Victor, which was a war comic, and every week the cover story was true stories of men at war. This is Victor. As fathers stroll home from work, there is no bird song, and November light is all but gone. Small boys run amok in avenues, take cover behind privet hedges, the smell of cordite heavy in the air. Over the traffic, the sound of battle, grenades whistling overhead, the sporadic rattle of toy guns from doorways. At tea time, those whose turn it is break cover, make a zigzagging run for it, shouting, Achtung, Achtung. They go down in a hail of bullets, competing for the most dramatic death. The pavement is so littered with Germans, the men must pick a way through to reach their gates, take their sons down paths into quiet houses. That's just Cafe Writers Poetry Competition. You're all winners, I can see you in the room. Leaflets down there. So part of that charity, I've been interviewing soldiers who benefit from the Army Benevolence Fund, and one of them is Stuart Harris, who got blown up, and several of them. He also found a bear in a garden in Bosnia, so this kind of brings those two together, and this is for Stuart. Bear. Betrayal will happily walk with you, knows your patterns, the roof runs and dead ends of conflict. Conflict will lift you skyward, then lay you down on the broken dirt. Stu woke clean white and wondered if this was hell. The bear in the next bed explained it was Birmingham. And over weeks they reminisced, became firm friends. When it was time, the bear came home with him and was too big for the house. The bear blundered about, breaking ornaments, cracked its head against the lights, and shadows skittering about the walls. The bear brooded, and the children shrank back from its rancid breath, which made the bear roar. The rooms of the house became dead ends. One night, Stu placed his hand into the bear's paw, and together they walked to the edge of the sea, and were the most sorrowful sight the sea had ever seen. The sea took pity and let them step into her low swell. They clung together while the sea murmured about home, until the bear struck out for the moonlit horizon. Stu stood alone on the kitchen floor, water pooled about him. He was so tired his own undone shoelaces were an unfathomable conundrum. Right, this is a new one, written last Monday. What day is it? Tuesday, I know. I haven't written anything for a while, but it comes from 20 years ago. You know, you've got something that you've never forgotten, and then it's time for writing comes about when we're in Totnes eating vegan breakfasts and things, which Damien evoked for us so well. But one of the things photographer and artist in residence in Horden, Working Men's Club, which is an ex-mining village, and the mines had closed down a few years before. And there would be men standing about on the pavement. I kind of never forgotten. And when someone said, "Oh, I went up, saw Steve standing on his corner this morning," I said, "How long have you been there, Steve?" He said, 11 years. And so this kind of idea have never left me, that men just sort of stood around with nothing to do. So this is about that, which finally, I hope, come to fruition. We'll see. If you boo me off, we know it hasn't worked. The remaining men. When the men surfaced for the last time and dispersed, some of them were left over. These men wandered about the town until they each found their own particular sweet spot. Then they just stood there, looking out with their red-rimmed eyes over the scarred coast to the rough brown sea, or back at the pit wheel and valley slag heaps. As the days went by, people gave up asking them why they were so still and if they could fetch someone or something, and they just let them be. They became like street signage, A-boards, park prams or tied-up dogs, something to be manoeuvred around. As the months went by, the men became hardened to the weather whipping through them and filling their coat pockets with hail. During the great storm of '87, their caps blew off and went cartwheeling down the streets with the bin lids. As the years went by, the slag heaps faded to green and saplings were planted. The men began to petrify into monuments. When the new road for the business park went through, a lot of them were tipped back onto trolleys like the ones railway porters used to use, then loaded onto flatbed trucks with the traffic cones. Most were broken down for aggregate. The lucky ones were sold off as novelty porch lights and stood outside front doors on the new estate, illuminating small front lawns and driveways. As the decades went by, saplings became sycamores and elms and named colliery wood. In autumn, the early morning light on them was glorious, and cycle paths made their way there. The remaining men were defaced by graffiti and badly worn by then. Many considered them to be an eyesore. When children asked what they were, not everyone could remember, and of those that did, few were believed. As the centuries went by, they all but disappeared. Only the circle in the park remained. Archaeologists and historians now disagree about their origin. Maybe all right. So that business park, it occurred to me after the sort of post-industrial sort of decline, new industries sprung up in new towns, and then those industries died, and what happened to those towns that weren't beautiful, like Bournemouth or Norwich, where we live, and didn't have anything to flog from centuries gone by? What would they do? And so this is based on this sort of town right in the absolute centre of the country, as far from the coast or anything picturesque as you could imagine. Sand. A little Midlands new town with nothing left to make or do, or mountains to speak of, and no one passing through. The bypass exit sign does not say an historic market town. No stately home, cathedral, cobbled streets, no green or pond, no ducks, no honey stones, second homes, just overspill without blue plaques. The town hall is an office block. Still, they won't just chuck it in, and with a grant, men turn themselves brick by brick into a museum, while their nimble-fingered wives fashion jewellery from circuit boards, components and coloured wires to stock the shelves by the postcard rack and stacks of books of bygone days. The town has edged itself with sand, the one-way circuit, a never-ending coastal road. Hold a shell to your ear and hear the rush of the N6, M5 intersection. Bunting hangs from shop to shop, the precinct is ablaze. A promenade of windows blind with Union Jacks. A mural by a local artist adorns the underpass. The marketing's rolled out to Leamington Spa, to Droitwich, to Telford, to Ashby de la Zouch, and all points in between. On the next bank holiday, everybody waits. The dripping hanging baskets, the portly mare in chains, the goose-pimpled beauty queen, kids holding maypole ribbons, balloons or flags. The seal not done up as mods and rockers, ready for the battle of 64, on the hour, every hour, a maze, a brass band tuning up, the lost children's hut, seagulls in a cloudless sky, vendors of buckets, spades and fudges, the committee wearing "Can I help you" badges. Thank you. Christmas! It's a Christmas poem to get you in the spirit. Helen was a bit of a Grinch on the way in, sing a Christmas. It's November the 12th, sunny. 6 weeks to Christmas, it'll all be over. So this is, in that spirit, this is a haiku, family Christmas. Every single year we gather around the tree, opening old wounds. There we go. So a couple of family poems. Gillian Waring, the artist, it's a commissioned poem, did this video piece, 2 into 1, where she filmed her mother talking about her 2 toadish boys, and then filmed the boys talking about their mother, and then she reversed it and lip synced, so it looked like the boys were speaking the mother's words, and the mother was speaking the boys' words, and the father doesn't get a voice, but is very much there in what was said, particularly by the mother. So a lot of this is found from what she said, mostly, and it's a specular, which is a poem that's a poem of 2 halves, and the second half is a reverse of the first half, line by line. It works its way back up and kind of eats itself. Failure, and it's in the mother's voice. He loves me, I suppose. I am a failure. There's a better way of doing things. I am a dramatic woman. I know I think too much of myself and I should be submissive, a proper wife. He's very caring, really. He says I like to be dominated. When he's jealous, he's abusive towards me. I'm afraid I won't grow old. I sometimes tell him that. He's beautiful looking. He will try and tell me about love, but hate is something he needs and I don't. He says I am a failure and I don't. He says I am a failure, but hate is something he needs. Try and tell me about love. He's beautiful looking. He will grow old. I sometimes tell him that he's abusive towards me. I'm afraid I won't be dominated when he's jealous. He's very caring, really. He says I like to be submissive, a proper wife. I think too much of myself and I should. I am a dramatic woman. I know there's a better way of doing things. I suppose I am a failure. He loves me. And a couple of people have done mother poems, so I'm going to do one, New Year Redux. And it's a kind of an amazing thing happened 2 or 3 years ago at a party. My mother died when I was 9. Here she is on the cover of this book. She was a Scouser. So I never knew her when I was an adult. And then Helen and some of our friends dressed in the vintage fashion. And I had this flashback of a memory I'd forgotten for over 50 years, that I'd been allowed to stay up on New Year's Eve and see the new year in as a dark-haired person with a piece of coal that goes through the back door at midnight. I don't know if that still happens. And I had this flashback of something I'd forgotten for over 50 years. And so as the evening went on, I kind of drifted between now and then and heaven, I suppose. So this poem's about that, New Year Redux. It was a foggy night in this little terraced house, and all the women in their party dress. Read the poem, Martin. New Year Redux. Each guest slips from fog and through the door like a softly lit movie star, and casts adrift the new build houses opposite, the call centres, the inner ring road's constant hum, and this little room is warm and bright with party dresses and men with quiffs in baggy suits, and in the bedroom up above where all the faux fur coats are chucked, the radio's clock flips back and back, and above the roof, above the fog, stars are streaks across the sky, and above all that, beehives glow like standard lamps, and Louis Prima swings and jokes are spilt, and someone shouts, Fetch me a blousy woman now. And his wife throws a scarf about his neck, kisses him loose upon the mouth, and from our mouths, if you knew Susie like I know Susie, oh, 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 what a girl. And in the yard fog is smoke, and smoke is breath, and cigarettes are shooting stars, and through the misted windows blur is that my mother's gap-toothed grin, my aunts and uncles counting down, and is this me at the back door, a lump of coal gripped in my fist. Staying with the family theme, keeping an eye on his watch. And look, I've got all this. There's about 2 hours worth there. Don't worry, I won't. Right. But I'm very fortunate to have a Down syndrome daughter. She's 36 now, and she's quite grumpy for a Downs. If you know any Downs people, we think she's got irritable Down syndrome. This is our theory. But since she's about this big, she's had a series of very intense love affairs. And she's now 30 years later, about that big, and still sort of moving through lovers. And there's a kind of answer to this poem, because it was written a few years ago. But this is Amy's lovers. It's not enough to love them, she must climb into their skins and wear them like pyjamas. It's Fireman Sam just now, has been for a couple of years. She wanders that pyromaniacal town with matches in her backpack. She'll smoke out the hero inside herself, hit rewind again and again, can't get enough of his tune until 6 p.m. when she turns Sam off for Channel 4, taps her fingertips together, and is Mr. Charles Montgomery Burns. She has his shaky walk down pat, mimics his villainous laugh while Sam pretends to polish his axe. He knows it's not the last Lothario though, but the next. Some new kid or pixels on the big screen at the multiplex, a cheap toy with her Big Mac, then it's shopping for DVDs, utility belts and action figures, and his heart's of stone, while out west Woody tips back his hat, squints through the haze of all the years, and Shaggy turned up in his mystery machine, and she began to dress in brown and green, left her sheriff badge to tarnish, but Woody was first and best and bides his time. Toy Stories 2 and 3 went by, but he's pretty sure when 4 comes out, she'll mosey on into town in a cowskin waistcoat, shout, "Yee-haw, Woody," like she's never been gone. And Toy Story 4 is out, and we've been 5 times, twice in 2 days. So thankfully Woody's back, because the Fireman Sam years were pretty rough. And Sean once, when he was a teenager, right, in the way, came in from school, and I said, "How was your day?" And then I said, "What did you do?" And this went on for a while. I said, "Do you know any words with more than one syllable?" And he looked at me and he went, "Wanker." So that's why he's got no nice poems about him. There's this one though. It's a parody of Larkin's eulogy to his parents, which some of you may know. This be the words. They fuck you up, your kids. They may not mean to, but they do. They take all the faults you have and throw them back twice as hard at you, but they will fuck up in their turn in fashionable clothes that look good now, but in years to come in a photograph album will return to shame and haunt them. Children return lovers' guilt to parents that deepens like crap on a bedroom floor. Move them on as early as you can and don't ever try for any more. How are we doing? Who? Harold Wilson. Oh, this is a sweet one as well. Harold Wilson. So, Harold Wilson, you all know about Harold Wilson. He's a brilliant Oxford scholar, a bit, I don't know how to put it, it's in the poem. But, and he resigned mid-term because he's at the early stages of Alzheimer's, which is quite sad. And every year he would don his baggy shorts and go to the Scilly Isles to go bird watching and do photo opportunities with the press. But he had this other life, which politicians now tend not to. He did this thing every year, and he had a little bungalow on the Scilly Isles, and he went with Mary. So, and off the coast of the Scilly Isles, this amazing lighthouse, Bishop's Rock, which just comes out of the sea on this crag of rock from nowhere. So this imagines the kind of, I suppose, the end of Harold. So it's Harold Wilson roads towards Bishop's Rock. Harold, knees like little moons, bends his back, puffs through the clamouring halyards of the bay, always 6 moves ahead of the other buggers, be they old Etonians or fellow grammar grubbers, and where else to escape serious concerns but these silly isles? The cormorant is attentive company at the blunt end of the boat, kinked wings hung out to dry, Harold's words gulped down like slippery fish, the oars are worn soft in their locks. While he rows, he recalls himself a boy in a school cap at the steps of number 10. On the slipway, Mary diminishes to the red dot of her coat. The lighthouse lays down her path, tugs the glow of Gannett's mac and pipe smoke through the net curtain of Mizzle. Mary turns, heads up the slope towards the archipelago's clustered lights and their ugly little bungalow. Right, time for 2 more to finish off. I'm just going to do, just really because of Paul's experience in Doncaster. We sometimes stay in Blythe Travel Lodge, which is just off it's at the A1 on the way up onto gig. And I got married in Stainton, my first wife, my second favourite wife. So far. It's from Doncaster, so I kind of know round there quite a bit. So this is, and having moved south, my brothers are in Crewe, which they claim to be north. It's only 30 miles north of Norwich, but apparently it's an important 30 miles. So this is a northern accent. Having moved south, it's not something you're going to need all the time. Keep it about your person, though, for those occasions when it might do you some good. For instance, making southerners feel as if they haven't worked quite as hard as they might have to get where they are. Use it to order beer but not wine, and when you meet a real northerner, keep your mouth shut. No one laughed at the southerners bit. Okay, so this is the last poem. It's been really great. Well, I really enjoyable evening. I really enjoyed listening to absolutely everyone. It's been so good, really good. And so this is another northern poem. So I'm from the northwest, and I'm thinking of Damien set that sort of vibe of beat poetry thing going on when Ginsberg sort of evoked all of that in his famous poem, that kind of went on to define him in that whole era of cellar bars and drugs and jazz and all that going on. And I thought, what a shame no one did the same for the northwest of England of the same period. So I have. And Ginsberg called his poem Howl. Mine's called Ahem. We all got books for sale. It's Boring the Arse Off Young People, which is Helen's wonderful books, and Damien's CD, and T's book, and we've got a little shop down there. And there's nothing as heavy as unsold books. And we promise not to spend it on anything responsible. Give us some money. Okay, and so this is a hem. I saw the best suits of my parents' generation destroyed by poor tailoring synthetic fibres and hysterical lapels, dragging their shopping down the high streets of Albion in packer-macs with hairdos under hairnets and edge scarves, brill-creamed-headed husbands burning pipe tobacco in walnut bowls and inhaling through the clenched teeth of repressed ardour, who feared the wind rush down the Negro streets of Victoriana, blowing the sounds and smells that threatened the unfamiliar, and didn't even know Elvis Presley existed yet, who got drunk on homemade egg flip at Christmas and sang the old songs round the piano while their kids were happy with a tangerine or dinky toy, who saved so that one day they might have a little car and be saluted by the AA man as they drove by, who were all the time boiling vegetables to eat with spam while listening to the radiogram valve singing hot with family favourites, and after sprouts there was much binding in the marsh until Billy Cotton cried out, "Oh, wakey, wakey," and bandstand glow hollowed out in the deathly grey of cathode rays, who on Fridays went dancing up the club in sixpence a week Montague Burton suits and crammed into 18-hour girdles and mail-order dresses with their blue hair piled on top, but just too soon to have ever been teenagers, who dripped out to Skegness, Vimto-fueled in charabangs to shine under Billy Butlin's neon. Our true intent is all for your delight, while being served brown ale by lasses from Doncaster in grass skirts under plastic palm trees in the Beachcomber bar, who never used their front rooms but kept it pure, and the antimacassars pressed for visits by doctors or vicars or teachers for tin salmon, tin pears and tin milk, and always polished their front steps and never ran out of string, who knew their place and never thought the universities were for the likes of them, but prayed for office jobs for their children and stood for God save the Queen at the Empire and said how wonderful their policemen were, and fought in the war for the likes of me, who had more words for toilet than the Inuit have for snow, and put their teeth in jars and slept in their vests under candlewick counterpanes with dreams of winning the pools, and bungalows in Cheshire with inside loos and labour-saving devices, who at dawn trod into brown slippers onto coal brown linoleum and could only face the day through the sweet brown haze of 100 cups of tea and 20 Capstan full strength. Thank you very much for listening.